Of course, the Warriors dispatching of your Dallas Mavericks in 5 games in the Western Conference Finals, but still a very successful season for the MFFLs, watching this Mavericks team get to the Western Conference Finals. And if you're Charles Barkley and you believe it's a fluke, well, the Mavericks have a chance to prove you wrong, Charles, going into next year. So the question we pose here as we get started in this conversation, Reg, what do the Mavericks have to do to get back to the Western Conference Finals and beyond, so that we are seeing this Mavericks team on this stage maybe next year or the year after, playing for the Larry O'Brien Trophy?
This is going to be the conversation that we have all summer, obviously. So
yes.
This is not going to be the end all be all.
The precursor to that larger discussion throughout the course of the summer, for sure.
And so this conversation is all about figuring out what it was that hampered them and held them back. So from the 214, someone says it's as simple as get a second star, all caps.
That's a loaded answer. Not gonna
and
lie.
Sure, yeah, get a lot of star players. Hell, why stop at 2? Get 3,
get
4, 5. But obviously there's things that hamper.
Not 5, not 6,
not 7.
Not 7.
Yeah. All that. But there's things that make that more difficult. One of which being you are already in a place where you're over the salary cap, and if you want to keep Jalen Brunson, you're in the luxury tax. And so the path that you get to getting a second star is tough. And also, who is that second star and what did they do? I think that Bobby Marks did a really good job of kind of talking about this. And Tim McMahon of ESPN really tried to break down what this team is and where they exist right now. And one of the things that has been talked about with a lot of people as they break down this Mavs team is that I think it was Rob Mahoney, the Ringer, talked about how this actually probably is a sustainable model for them, where you have your hub being LeBron James, your equivalent of LeBron James, Luka Doncic, right? Where you have that hub for him around there, and it's a lot more akin to that 2011 Mavs team, where you have one really, really, really good player,
generational talent,
NBA, all NBA level player, and a whole bunch of complimentary guys who maybe don't rise to the level of star, but all fit in around what this team does well. And I've been battling with if I agree with that, but I've come closer to appreciating that as an answer and saying, yeah, you know what? Having a whole bunch of guys that fit around Luka Doncic might be more important than just going and trying to reach for a superstar in particular.
And we want to hear from you on this conversation as well. The TruckRate.com text line 877-881-1053. Also, if you've got some thoughts that you want to share with us here on the Get Right, the phone line is open, 877-881-1053. What do the Mavericks have to do to get back to the Western Conference Finals and beyond as we look at Game 1 tonight between the Warriors and the Boston Celtics? And I think philosophically there's a large question that has to be answered, and you started to allude to it. How do the Mavericks want to build around Luka Doncic? Do you want to take the route of providing high-level role players around him and then accentuating his strengths that he has? Or do you find that second co-star, if you will, to be able to take some of the load and pressure off of him so that he doesn't have to carry the amount of usage and the amount of wear and tear that's going to be on a Luka Doncic year after year, knowing how important he is to carrying this franchise? And I think what's important to look at here, because I don't necessarily want this team to go down the route that they did with Dirk in terms of putting around a bunch of high-level role players. I know Jason Kidd, NBA Hall of Famer, toward the end of his career, Tyson Chandler, Sean Marion, Jason Terry, a lot of guys that were knowing what their roles were, but obviously later into their careers. Having Dirk shoulder all of that, while it was heroic and historic the way that he did it, I don't know if necessarily in today's NBA that you want to have one guy shouldering that amount of load. Even when you look at Milwaukee last year, with Giannis dominating the way that he did, Chris Middleton could go win you a basketball game if he needs to.
And don't forget what Drew Holiday adds in that.
Exactly, Drew Holiday. Those are the kinds of guys that we're talking about that helped a Giannis even win an NBA championship. I think you have to help Luka Doncic in that way, be able to have that kind of player, an all-star level-like player, to take some of that load off of him. But I think, to me, that's the philosophical question that this team will have to answer is, how do we go about building around this generational talent, Do we do it with high-level role players, or do we find another co-star that can share some of that load with him, whether it be a big man in the middle that can be a stretch five and can do some of the things shooting from the three-point line, or a Bradley Beal type of player who can go get his own bucket, create his own shot, and be able to take some of that scoring load off of Luka Doncic in that way?
Yeah, the tough part about you would, of course, love to have a second player, but at what cost and with what avenues? Because right now, the Mavs don't have any salary cap space.
No.
And the assets that they do have, the question is how tradable are those, and how desired would those be around the league? And I don't know that I have a particular answer to that in particular. Somebody asked, what are the repercussions of being on the luxury tax from the 817? What happens with the luxury tax is you have to pay your salary. You pay a portion of, or you pay a multiplier of however far you are over the cap.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets paid into the kitty for the entirety of the NBA that is then, I think, distributed to other teams in the league that are not in the luxury tax. I believe that's how that goes.
And if you can continue to do it year over year,
there's
you
a
repeater tax.
Yeah, so then that multiplier does go up.
Mm-hmm.
But like I was talking about earlier, and this has to be the way that we talk about this, the NBA playoffs are not about what you can do. They're about what you can't do. So addressing the things that you've had issues with is the point, especially if you want to use like the Utah Jazz as an example. That was a team that, in a certain point, you were building to, we need to make the playoffs. Once you get there, you now need to build for, who do we expect to see in the playoffs? What are the things that we're going to be challenged with? And what answers do we need to have ahead of time so that we have something to respond with? And very clearly, this Mavs team needs rim protection. Right, that's something that
Nico Harrison even said it during his exit interviews. We need a rim protector, guy who can help rebound.
Point blank, period. Right.
Yeah.
This team was pretty good defensively this year, and a lot of it was effort and the right scheme. And of course, you leaned on a couple of really, really good perimeter defenders. But any defensive possession is ended off with a rebound, right? And you can't. I don't think you can depend on Luka Doncic to be your primary rebounder in the way that you did. So it all seems to point to a big that is capable of getting rebounds, a big that's capable of being a defensive, at least changing shots, if not being somebody who swats them out of the air. And when you get a big in this modern NBA, if you want them to be able to stay on the floor, they need to be able to stay in front of defenders. So I think that's the optimum of what you want. Now you go, where do we go shopping for that? Where do we get guys that can do that? Because typically guys that can do that can end up getting paid.
Yep.
And then we're back in the place where we're talking about, how do you get that player?
And some of the guys that, we've heard mentioned throughout the course, of the NBA season, now going into the offseason, when we start looking at center types, Rudy Gobert, Mo Bamba is a name that I continue to see thrown out there, the center from Orlando, a Miles Turner, a Mitchell Robinson, some of these names that you're going to continue to be bantied about. Now, in the case of a Miles Turner, it sounds like Indiana, after moving on for Domantas Sabonis, they may be willing to try and build around him. Obviously, Malcolm Brogdon's still there. Mitchell Robinson's a very interesting name.
Mitchell Robinson is a free agent. So
yes,
I'm going to ask you this on the fly here. I didn't prepare you with this question. Is it possible to have a sign and trade with Mitchell Robinson, seeing as he is a true free agent, and then you have Jalen Brunson here on that side? Because I imagine anything that you do when it comes to a trade is probably going to involve Jalen Brunson. I could be wrong on that, but that is the assumption that I'm making for a lot of the stuff, because he seems to be the most desirable asset that you have right now.
Which is interesting, because when we talk about the Knicks, in a piece of interesting news that came across today,
Worldwide West out here acting like Nick Saban and them in college football.
Yes.
Well, not Nick Saban. They don't need to do this, but the college football aesthetic of, hey, we want this player. Do you have anybody in your family who needs a job?
And they found, of course, Rick Brunson, Jalen Brunson's father, now who has been an assistant in the past.
Sure.
Tom Thibodeau is close to finalizing an agreement to become an assistant coach once again.
But he had been a coach in high school for like 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So not saying that, again, that there's any nefarious things, but if you wanted to make that jump, there's a possibility to.
Yeah, there's a natural leap there that Jalen Brunson's father going to work for Tom Thibodeau, who obviously works for the Knicks, and the Knicks being their free agent list, having Jalen Brunson on it. Of course, you can make a natural kind of connection, if you will, if that's what, the Knicks are trying to do. But I think Mitchell Robinson is a guy that you look at that can be a five that can not only rebound, can block shots, but provides you more versatility at a higher level than what you currently have right now on this roster. And I think that, to me, if you're going to go down the route of getting a five, a big man, he's got to have versatility. Stretch the floor, can shoot the three a little bit, can obviously block shots, but as you mentioned, close out rebounding, close out defensive possessions.
Well, Mitchell ain't no three-point shooter. And when I say that, I don't mean like they're bad. He legitimately has not attempted one in 4 seasons.
Yeah, no, so I'm saying like there's those kinds of guys that have that kind of versatility. Mitchell Robinson provides you some of that, not necessarily with the shooting, but the other aspects of what you're looking for that you don't currently have on this roster.
Just
right
having
now.
a guy who can do those things, because you still have Maxi Kleber. I think his contract is currently not guaranteed, but I don't see the world in which they don't have Maxi Kleber on this team next season. So Maxi Kleber can still be the guy that is the 5-out lineup guy. But
that comes off the bench.
You do need somebody who is better than Dwight Powell at doing the other things, the shot blocking, the rebounding, and those things, being that big player. So Mitchell Robinson is an interesting one. That requires a level of, one, being willing to trade Jalen Brunson. I think, I'm using my own prism here, thinking that Jalen Brunson is, one, the guy that the Knicks desire, and two, probably the most desirable asset in general. But you would need Mitchell Robinson you need Jalen Brunson to do that, and I don't think the Mavs are in a place where they feel like they want to trade him.